Welcome to the Flame Tree Myth and Fiction podcast.
Today we're reading two stories from one of our most highly anticipated books of 2026. This one is in our Gothic Fantasy series and is releasing this month. Honestly, given how much we love horror at Flame Tree and how well our folk horror book in our Beyond and Within series was received, I'm shocked it's taken us this long to bring one out in this format. But it's here. Tales of whispering woods, gloom, primeval mysteries, and terrifying omens all bound together in one comprehensive volume. This one was sourced in part from open submissions, and the rest was curated by our editorial team to deliver an overview of some of the best classic short stories within the genre. We've got one of each on today's podcast. Starting with Woodface by Charlie Hughes. This story is about a little girl who refuses to bow to the tyranny of an ancient and powerful monster. The author has sent me something to read on his behalf, but I think that I might read it after the story this time, so there will be well and truly no spoilers. Enjoy Woodface by Charlie Hughes, read by Olivia. Woodface by Charlie Hughes. I don't want the town to be bad anymore. They'll be angry at first, the townspeople, but they'll see the truth in the end. I'll be the girl who saved them from Woodface. Woodface is supposed to be a secret. That's what they tell us. The teachers, parents, the doctor, Janice the lollipop lady, even the policeman who stands on the corner near the school. Don't talk about Woodface or you'll make it cry, they say. You must not make it cry. If they catch us saying its name, they shout angry words and warn about the rack and the river plank, or the hanging tree, or the pit, or any of the other punishments. Uncle Roger says it's tradition, a thing we do to keep the people on the right track. But I don't see how that's true. What's good about Woodface? It just makes people scared. The grown-ups have a way of talking to it. They go to the field where the hanging tree is at night. They make fires and sing songs and do special dances. If they're lucky, Woodface comes out of the ditch and speaks, tells them what the doomsday gods want them to do that month, that year, that whatever. The only other time it comes out is when people bring dead things for Woodface to eat. People do that all the time. They think it will bring them luck and make the doomsday gods happy with the town. I'm 10, and Woodface has cried 3 times I can remember. My brother Robbie is in big school, and he says there was another time when I was a baby. Nobody is quite sure what makes Woodface cry. Most of the kids think talking behind its back is the main reason, but that's because the adults tell them so. I think Woodface likes to cry because it reminds people who was put there by the doomsday gods to look after the town. They tell us the doomsday gods gave the town its name in the first place, and if Woodface tells them to get rid of the town, they will. But that's all a big lie. Woodface is just a bad monster who won't let us live a normal life like the other towns. Once, Mum said people telling lies or stealing other people's wives and husbands was the problem. When the town misbehaves, Woodface cries, she said. I didn't understand what she meant, and she was acting all fidgety. Dad heard her talking and took her down to the cellar to teach her a lesson. Dad doesn't like Mum to even think about Woodface, never mind talk. When Woodface cries, we all cry. Not tears like when you fall over and graze your knee. Red tears, blood tears. Much worse for the adults than children. We just have little drops dribbling down our cheeks. The blood pours from the adults' eyes, makes Mum and Dad tired for weeks and weeks after. I don't know how they choose the offering for the doomsday gods, but it always seems to be someone from the council estate. never the people from old families or those who run the shops and pubs in the town square.
The people with the big cars and the fancy names don't have to worry. They all talk among themselves and pick out a family and tell them how it has to be. The offering is made after Woodface cries. The person they choose from the council estate gets dragged, kicking and screaming, to the place Woodface chooses for the punishment, and the whole town has to watch. They never do the offering the same way twice in a row. There are lots of places around the edge of town which look normal but hide the punishments. The rack is in the woods. The hanging tree is out in the Darlington fields, and the sole axe is kept at the bottom of the hill next to Mary Panel Corner. The one I remember well was the pit, 2 years ago. Woodface was furious about something, and our eyes had bled for a while. They got Stanley Webster, a teenager from the estate, and put him in the pit near the river. They threw him into the deep, deep hole, and Woodface came out from the hiding place and whistled to the animals. They all came from the woods, thousands and thousands. Squirrels, weasels, ferrets, mice and rats. An otter came out of the river, which I thought was exciting until I realised what was going to happen. The whistle kept getting higher, so high I could hardly even hear. Some people put their hands on their ears to try and make it stop. All the animals started rushing into the pit, and you could hear Stanley Webster screaming. Didn't matter if you put your hands over your ears or not. He screamed so loud the birds in the trees all flew away. They were biting him. Teeny tiny animals, harmless on their own. Thousands and thousands of them taking nibbles, biting, biting, biting until the screaming stopped. Everything is so horrible, and I want it to end. I don't want Dad to be nasty to Mum and all the people saying you can't do this and you can't do that. Everyone shouting, everyone angry. All because of Woodface and the Doomsday Gods. The people in Kinnerton and Treddington and Tyso smile more than the people here. I might be little, but I can stop Woodface. I worked it out, see, how it's all a big secret. Things like this shouldn't happen anymore. We've got trains and computers and phones and great big cars with electric engines now. People in other towns don't look up at the stars and pretend there are doomsday gods or magic monsters in the sea or the world being flat on the back of a great bear held in place by a ragged staff. Not anymore. Woodface has been here for too long. If the people had been braver, they would have got rid of it when the roads and the churches and the ships got built. But somehow Woodface clung on, and so the people in the town still think the gods are there. So stupid. All I have to do is tell the secret outside of town, show them what's happening. Then the proper police and the government will come and get rid of Woodface. They don't need to be scared because they've got guns and tanks and all sorts. It can't make their eyes bleed. Mum's been going crazy looking for her phone, but she hasn't even asked me if I took it because she thinks I'm a good girl who always does what she is told. When she dropped me off at school today, I pretended to go in the gate, but as soon as she drove round the corner, I came out again, telling Janice the lollipop lady I had to get something from the corner shop. The policeman on the corner watches me go, but he is fat and lazy and doesn't seem all that bothered, at least not enough to follow me. I walk on the back streets, all the way through town, up the hill and into the field where Long Ditch is, carrying the plastic bag I'd hid in my school rucksack. The field doesn't look different to any other. Grass, trees, fences. Down at the bottom of the slope is the river. People from outside town come here all the time and never know how close they are to Woodface. My grandma says the outsiders can't see him anyway. She said they don't see the special patterns in the grass or hear the strange noises the trees make when the wind comes from the west. Grandma knows a lot about Woodface and the Doomsday Gods, but she never thought about getting rid of them. There's nobody around, but I run across the field anyway in case an adult sees me and guesses what my plan is. When I get to the ditch, I'm out of breath, so I bend over, take a while to slow myself down. When I get upright again, I peer into the darkness of the ditch. "Woodface, come out," I say. My voice is smaller than I want it to be. Nothing happens, so I try again, sounding more grown up this time. "Woodface, come out!" There is a shuffling from the ditch, and I spot a branchy hand reaching out and grabbing the grass above. I step back. It makes a wet, slurpy sound while pulling itself up. Woodface's mouth is the wrong shape, so all the sounds are wrong. The body and head are made from old tree. Up it comes. The twigs and bark snap and crack as it moves. I have to look at it out of the corner of my eye, because if I look straight ahead and see its black eyes and slurpy lips, I know I'll be sick. I put my hand in my pocket and take out the phone. Quick as I can, I unlock the screen using Mum's secret not secret code. But I keep the phone down by my side so Woodface won't see. It's standing up now and I step back again. I do not want to make it cry. If I do, all the town will bleed and they'll know what I've been up to.
"What do you on its chicks?"
Woodface says. It never gets the words right because of the wrong-shaped mouth. It speaks in nasty, wet cackles, like someone with lots and lots of phlegm in their throats. I hold up the plastic bag. "Mum says you like cats. That you eat them."
"Catty puss, good girlie. Give Woodface catty puss."
I had to steal the cat from next door. I didn't want to, but how else could I get to talk to Woodface distracted? It wasn't easy. To kill, I mean. I didn't want to, but Woodface won't eat them unless they are dead and smelly. I toss the bag with the dead cat towards Woodface. It looks at me and then down at the bag.
"Catty puss for me? Good child."
"Yes, for you," I say. It points to the sky.
"God's happy with you, little girl,"
it says.
"You make the town go on."
"Yes," I say, doing my fakest smile. "Eat now, Woodface." Woodface bends down and looks in the bag. I lift the phone and press record. I must get to Stratford. Stratford is the biggest town in the area. There is a proper police station, and there are lots and lots of shops, a theatre, and big schools which teach kids normal science and maths. I keep checking the phone to make sure the recording hasn't been lost. It's perfect. Nobody could make up a video like this. There is a bus stop out on the main road, so I go there. The route goes around our town and rejoins the road to Stratford here. I hide behind the bus shelter while I wait, to stop any of the local people getting suspicious. When the bus finally comes, the driver gives me a funny look. "Shouldn't you be in school?" he asks. "Got a doctor's appointment." "Your mum and dad not taking you?" "Not today," I say. "Can I have a ticket?" And with a shrug, he lets me on the bus. There are two old ladies sat at the front, and they look at me funny too. I give them a great big smile as the bus moves away. 30 minutes later, I get off near the police station and go in the entrance. There is a queue to get to the desk, so I wait my turn until I can finally speak to the police. I get up on my tiptoes so she can see me over the counter. "Hello, young lady," she says. "How can I help?" "There's a monster in my town. It's called Woodface. It makes everyone sad, and when it cries, everyone's eyes bleed. All the people think there are gods in the sky who made the town happen in the first place, hundreds and hundreds of years ago." The police officer tilts her head and frowns. "Where's your mum and dad?" "In the town. All the people do what Woodface tells them." "But I won't. I've got proof." I hold up the phone. Still frowning, she says, "You'd better come through." I'm sat in a room with a table and a bunch of posters on the wall telling people to report crimes to the police. Seems silly to put the posters inside a police station, but I don't say that to the two officers sitting across from me. They are looking at the phone and playing it over and over. Their faces screw up every time it gets to the bit where Woodface is eating the cat. The older one, the man, puffs out his cheeks and says, "Where did you get this, then?" "I told you I filmed it on the phone." "And where is it you live again?" I go to tell him the name of the town, but something strange has happened. The town... "Come on now, you must know the name of your hometown." I try to calm down because I can feel the heat of embarrassment rising in my cheeks. "I'm sorry, it's been very tiring. I was so scared about coming here on my own about filming Woodface." The woman says, "That's okay, love. How did you get here?" "On the bus, on the Stratford Road." She takes out her own phone. It has a great big screen. She comes round the table and crouches down next to me so we can both look at the phone together. "Here, you show me on the map." "That way," I say. I follow the line of the Stratford Road with my finger. Past Alderminster, past Newbold, past Treddington Roundabout, past the turning for Honington. "There," I say. "That's where the town is." The lady officer looks up at her partner, then back at me. "There's no town there, love. Never been anything there but fields." "There is!" I can feel it coming, the tears. The guy sounds annoyed. "What's it called then?" "Dave, she's a kid," she says. But it's no use. I've got my hands over my ears and I'm sobbing because I can't remember the name of the town even though I must know it. The town is... I told the secret and now Woodface is punishing me, punishing everyone. It's called... But it won't come, no matter how hard I think. What will happen to Mum, to Dad, to Robbie? I cry and cry and cry. When it's all spent, all out of me, I take my hands off my face and look up. "Jesus," the man says. "Oh my." The woman police officer is shaking her head. "What?" I ask. She sounds scared now, backing away from me. "Your eyes. They're bleeding."
From the author Charlie Hughes. I live in South London with my wife and 2 kids. Around my day job and other commitments, I write short stories for horror anthologies and magazines. I started writing about 10 years ago in my late 30s after becoming a father for the first time. I'm not sure these things are related, but I've always suspected they might be. My earliest stories were not horror but dark suspense, with no supernatural elements. These were mostly attempts to replicate the authors I enjoyed so much, such as Patricia Highsmith, Donald E. Westlake, and John D. MacDonald. Over time, I found myself veering towards horror and weird fiction. I learned as I went, reading broadly in a genre that was still new to me, writing and sending out stories for submission calls. Slowly but surely, from around 2020 onwards, the steady flow of rejections began to include some acceptances. My ghost story, Remains, was purchased for Flame Tree's Close to Midnight anthology around this time, being included alongside writers I'd taken inspiration from, like Ramsey Campbell and Adam Neville, felt like a step up. Since then, I haven't looked back. You can find my work in Cosmic Horror Monthly, The Dark, the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, Horror Library Anthology Series, and Fiends in the Furrows and others. Several of my stories have appeared in Ellen Datlow's Best Horror of the Year anthology, an occurrence I still find difficult to believe. The second of these, The Motley, a folk horror tale set in my hometown of Shipston on Stour, is probably my best story to date and certainly the one that has received the most attention. The idea for Woodface initially came as a piece of narrative dialogue. It's still there at the start of the story unchanged. Don't talk about Woodface or you'll make it cry. There's a Crowded House album called Woodface, which may or may not have been lurking at the back of my mind at this time. I like that line, It was disquieting to think of a character worrying about a monster crying. I wanted to write a story which mined that wrongness. So I wrote a story in a child's voice about a town which hates itself almost as much as it hates the monster who controls it. I have a soft spot for Woodface because I wrote it quickly, over 2 days, and it has a stop the ride I want to get off quality which I enjoy a bit in other horror stories. If you want another example of this style, try The Man with the X-Ray Eyes by Richard Chizmar. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed Woodface and desist from activities which might make him cry. If you want to know where to find more of my stories, visit charliehugheswriting.blogspot.com. I hope you enjoyed that little taste of modern folk horror. Personally, I quite like that Charlie Hughes doesn't link the narrative to any specific folklore. It engages with the tropes of the subgenre without limiting it to one specific culture. Also, I hope my filter on Woodface's voice scared a couple of you. It was quite fun to play around with editing-wise, and Olivia has far too nice a voice to pull off a character that speaks in nasty wet cackles. For our next tale, we're remaining in our folklore horror book, but turning to something written in 1911 called The Music on the Hill, written by Saki. This is probably one of the most famous short stories written within this subgenre. It follows an urbanite woman who moves to the countryside and unwillingly disturbs pagan forces. This one is being read by Cornelia Colman.
The Music on the Hill by Saki. Sylvia Salton ate her breakfast in the morning room at Yesney with a pleasant sense of ultimate victory, such as a fervent Ironside might have permitted himself on the morrow of Worcester fight. She was scarcely pugnacious by temperament, but belongs to that more successful class of fighters who are pugnacious by circumstance. Fate had willed that her life should be occupied with a series of small struggles, usually with the odds slightly against her, and usually she had just managed to come through winning. And now she felt that she had brought her hardest and certainly her most important struggle to a successful issue. To have married Mortimer Salton, dead Mortimer, as his more intimate enemies called him, in the teeth of the cold hostility of his family, and in spite of his unaffected indifference to women, was indeed an achievement that had needed some determination and adroitness to carry through. Yesterday she had brought her victory to its concluding stage by wrenching her husband away from town and its group of satellite watering places and settling him down, in the vocabulary of her kind, in this remote wood-girt manor farm, which was his country house. "You will never get Mortimer to go," his mother had said carpingly. "But if he once goes, he'll stay. Yesney throws almost as much a spell over him as town does. One can understand what holds him to town, but Yesney—" And the dowager had shrugged her shoulders. There was a sombre, almost savage wildness about Yesney that was certainly not likely to appeal to town-bred tastes, and Sylvia, notwithstanding her name, was accustomed to nothing much more sylvan than leafy Kensington. She looked on the country as something excellent and wholesome in its way, which was apt to become troublesome if you encouraged it overmuch. Distrust of town life had been a new thing with her, born of her marriage with Mortimer, and she had watched with satisfaction as the gradual fading of what she called the Jermyn Street look in his eyes, as the woods and heather of Yesney had closed in on them yesternight. Her willpower and strategy had prevailed. Mortimer would stay. Outside the morning-room windows was a triangular slope of turf, which the indulgent might call a lawn, and beyond its low hedge of neglected fuchsia bushes, a steeper slope of heather and bracken dropped down into cavernous combes, overgrown with oak and yew. In its wild open savagery there seemed a stealthy linking of the joy of life with the terror of unseen things. Sylvia smiled complacently as she gazed with a School of Art appreciation at the landscape, and then, of a sudden, she almost shuddered. "It is very wild," she said to Mortimer, who had joined her. "One could almost think that in such a place the worship of Pan had never quite died out." "The worship of Pan never has died out," said Mortimer. "Other newer gods have drawn aside his votaries from time to time, but he is the nature god, to whom all must come back at last. He has been called the father of all the gods, but most of his children have been stillborn." Sylvia was religious in an honest, vaguely devotional kind of way, and did not like to hear her beliefs spoken of as mere aftergrowths. But it was at least something new and hopeful to hear dead Mortimer speak with such energy and conviction on any subject. "You don't really believe in Pan?" she asked incredulously. "I've been a fool in most things," said Mortimer quietly, "but I'm not such a fool as not to believe in Pan when I'm down here. And if you're wise, you won't disbelieve in him too boastfully while you're in his country." It was not till a week later, when Sylvia had exhausted the attractions of the woodland walks round Yessney, that she ventured on a tour of inspection of the farm buildings. A farmyard suggested in her mind a scene of cheerful bustle, with churns and flails and smiling dairymaids, and teams of horses drinking knee-deep in duck-crowded ponds. As she wandered among the gaunt grey buildings of Yessney Manor Farm, her first impression was one of crushing stillness and desolation, as though she had happened on some lone deserted homestead long given over to owls and cobwebs. Then came a sense of furtive, watchful hostility, the same shadow of unseen things that seemed to lurk in the wooded combes and coppices. From behind heavy doors and shuttered windows came the restless stamp of hoof or rasp of chain halter, and at times a muffled bellow from some stalled beast. From a distant corner a shaggy dog watched her with intent, unfriendly eyes. As she drew near, it slipped quietly into its kennel, and slipped out again as noiselessly when she had passed by. A few hens, questing for food under a rick, stole away under a gate at her approach. Sylvia felt that if she had come across any human beings in this wilderness of barn and byre, they would have fled wraith-like from her gaze. At last, turning a corner quickly, she came upon a living thing that did not fly from her. Astretch in a pool of mud was an enormous sow, gigantic beyond the town woman's wildest computation of swine flesh, and speedily alert to resent and, if necessary, repel the unwanted intrusion. It was Sylvia's turn to make an unobtrusive retreat. As she threaded her way past rickyards and cowsheds and long blank walls, she started suddenly at a strange sound. The echo of a boy's laughter, golden and equivocal. Jan, the only boy employed on the farm, a tow-headed, wizen-faced yokel, was visibly at work on a potato clearing, halfway up the nearest hillside. And Mortimer, when questioned, knew of no other probable or possible begetter of the hidden mockery that had ambushed Sylvia's retreat. The memory of that untraceable echo was added to her other impressions of a furtive, sinister something that hung around Yesney. Of Mortimer she saw very little. Farm and woods and trout streams seemed to swallow him up from dawn till dusk. Once, following the direction she had seen him take in the morning, she came to an open space in a nut copse, further shut in by huge yew trees, in the centre of which stood a stone pedestal surmounted by a small bronze figure of a youthful Pan. It was a beautiful piece of workmanship, but her attention was chiefly held by the fact that a newly cut bunch of grapes had been placed as an offering at its feet. Grapes were none too plentiful at the manor house, and Sylvia snatched the bunch angrily off the pedestal. Contemptuous annoyance dominated her thoughts as she strolled slowly homeward, and then gave way to a sharp feeling of something that was very near fright. Across a thick tangle of undergrowth, a boy's face was scowling at her, brown and beautiful, with unutterably evil eyes. It was a lonely pathway. All pathways round Yesney were lonely for the matter of that, and she sped forward without waiting to give a closer scrutiny to this sudden apparition. It was not till she had reached the house that she discovered that she had dropped the bunch of grapes in her flight. "I saw a youth in the wood today," she told Mortimer that evening. "Brown-faced and rather handsome, but a scoundrel to look at. A gypsy lad, I suppose." "A reasonable theory," said Mortimer. "Only there aren't any gypsies in these parts at present." "Then who was he?" asked Sylvia. And as Mortimer appeared to have no theory of his own, she passed on to recount her finding of the votive offering. "I suppose it was your doing," she observed. "It's a harmless piece of lunacy, but people would think you dreadfully silly if they knew of it." "Did you meddle with it in any way?" asked Mortimer. I threw the grapes away. It seemed so silly," said Sylvia, watching Mortimer's impassive face for a sign of annoyance. "I don't think you were wise to do that," he said reflectively. "I've heard it said that the wood gods are rather horrible to those who molest them." "Horrible perhaps to those that believe in them, but you see, I don't," retorted Sylvia. "All the same," said Mortimer in his even, dispassionate tone, "I should avoid the woods and orchards if I were you, and give a wide berth to the horned beasts on the farm." It was all nonsense, of course, but in that lonely wood-girt spot nonsense seemed to be able to rear a bastard brood of uneasiness. "Mortimer," said Sylvia suddenly, "I think we will go back to town sometime soon." Her victory had not been so complete as she had supposed. It had carried her onto ground that she was already anxious to quit. "I don't think you will ever go back to town," said Mortimer. He seemed to be paraphrasing his mother's prediction as to himself. Sylvia noted with dissatisfaction and some self-contempt that the course of her next afternoon's ramble took her instinctively clear of the network of woods. As to the horned cattle, Mortimer's warning was scarcely needed, for she had always regarded them as of doubtful neutrality at the best. Her imagination unsexed the most matronly dairy cows and turned them into bulls liable to see red at any moment. The ram who fed in the narrow paddock below the orchards she had adjudged, after ample and cautious probation, to be of docile temper. Today, however, she decided to leave his docility untested, for the usually tranquil beast was roaming with every sign of restlessness from corner to corner of his meadow. A low, fitful piping as if some reedy flute was coming from the depth of a neighbouring copse, and there seemed to be some subtle connection between the animal's restless pacing and the wild music from the wood. Sylvia turned her steps in an upward direction and climbed the heather-clad slopes that stretched in rolling shoulders high above Yesney. She had left the piping notes behind her, but across the wooded combes at her feet the wind brought her another kind of music, the straining bay of hounds in full chase. Yesney was just on the outskirts of the Devon and Somerset country, and the hunted deer sometimes came that way. Sylvia could presently see a dark body breasting hill after hill, and sinking again and again out of sight as he crossed the combes, while behind him steadily swelled that relentless chorus, and she grew tense with the excited sympathy that one feels for any hunted thing in whose capture one is not directly interested. And at last he broke through the outermost line of oak scrub and fern and stood panting in the open, a fat September stag carrying a well-furnished head. His obvious course was to drop down to the brown pools of Undercombe and thence make his way towards the red deer's favoured sanctuary, the sea. To Sylvia's surprise, however, he turned his head to the upland slope and came lumbering resolutely onward over the heather. It will be dreadful, she thought. The hounds will pull him down under my very eyes. But the music of the pack seemed to have died away for a moment, and in its place she heard again that wild piping, which rose now on this side, now on that, as though urging the failing stag to a final effort. Sylvia stood well aside from his path, half hidden in a thick growth of whortle bushes, and watched him swing stiffly upward, his flanks dark with sweat, the coarse hair on his neck showing light by contrast. The pipe music shrilled suddenly around her, seeming to come from the bushes at her very feet, and at the same moment the great beast slewed round and bore directly down upon her. In an instant her pity for the hunted animal was changed to wild terror at her own danger. The thick heather roots mocked her scrambling efforts at flight, and she looked frantically downward for a glimpse of oncoming hounds. The huge antler spikes were within a few yards of her, and in a flash of numbing fear she remembered Mortimer's warning to beware of horned beasts on the farm. And then, with a quick throb of joy, she saw that she was not alone. A human figure stood a few paces aside, knee-deep in the whortle bushes. "Drive it off!" she shrieked. But the figure made no answering movement. The antlers drove straight at her breast. The acrid smell of the hunted animal was in her nostrils, but her eyes were filled with the horror of something she saw other than her oncoming death, and in her ears rang the echo of a boy's laughter, golden and equivocal.
Do you think this is a lesson to city dwellers? Don't interfere with what you don't and can't understand. I do believe that people in the countryside who live closer to nature have a far greater respect for the power of natural forces, perhaps because they see on a daily basis the kind of destruction or life it can create in an instant. Saki was actually the pen name of Hector Hugh Munro, a British journalist and writer. He wrote about Edwardian high society and saw great success in the short story format, but he was tragically killed fighting in World War I. I hope you all enjoyed this episode that delved into the ancient and almighty gods of the woods. I would strongly urge you to pick up a copy of Folklore Horror because there are plenty more tales that explore folklore from all over the world, both new and old. Next week we'll be travelling to the stars to read a story from our brand new Gothic fantasy collection.
Thanks so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Flame Tree Myth and Fiction podcast and look forward to the next episode. Do recommend it to your friends. Goodbye for now.